Kenya is on the edge. There's tension in the air, streets burning, voices rising, and anger spilling out like never before. It seems something is breaking. You can hear it in the chants of the protesters, in the silence of the disappeared. And at the center of it all is one man, President William Ruto.
Today's events mark a critical turning point on how we respond to grave threats.
To some, he was the hustler president, the man who rose from poverty and promised to uplift the people. But to a great majority, he's become a symbol of betrayal, repression, and unbearable hardship. So, what went wrong? Why do Kenyans, especially the youth, really want William Ruto gone? The answer isn't just about the usual politics now. To understand this movement, this explosive anger boiling over, we need to go back. And not just to Ruto's election victory in 2022, but way back to the 1990s when a young William Ruto stepped into Kenya's political theater during a time of deep transition. It started with a lobby group, YK92, and it was here in this candle-reading outfit that Ruto began carving his path to power. Allegedly funded by dirty money, accused of fueling corruption at the highest levels, YK92 wasn't just a stepping stone, it was a warning sign, one that most people missed, but it wouldn't be the last time Ruto's name would be tied to scandal. What started as ambition would soon turn into something darker. This is the story of William Ruto and how he's tearing Kenya apart, one step at a time. It's the early 1990s. Kenya is at the crossroads. One party rule is collapsing. The streets are alive with chants for democracy. And while the country struggles to break free from dictatorship, a new face emerges quietly behind the scenes. William Samoei Ruto. Not a household name yet, just a fresh university graduate from the Rift Valley, armed with ambition and political instinct sharper than most. Ruto's first big break comes when he joins the Youth for Kano 92 or YK92, a powerful political machine built to secure re-election for President Daniel Arap Moi. But this wasn't your ordinary campaign group. It was flush with cash, billions.
He was the he was the president when Al-Qaeda attacked Kenya.
Of shillings allegedly looted from public coffers through the infamous Golden Brics scandal flowed into YK92 to literally buy votes. The streets were flooded with money, and Ruto was one of the operatives of this YK92. To the public, he would later brand himself as the hustler, the chicken seller who made it big. But behind closed doors, he was already playing in the big leagues, building alliances, accumulating wealth, and learning the art of politics.
Be surprised. No. Interesting.
Place looks like a fucking antique museum.
I guess you should feel right at home.
Chick's got taste. Except for one thing.
And what's that?
Way she looks at you. Don't pretend you haven't noticed. Makes you all mushy inside. I can feel it.
Political survivor. You see, the irony here was that his rise began with the very corruption he would later promise to fight. In 1997, Ruto won his first parliamentary seat representing Eldoret North. He soon became the symbol of the changing tides, young, loyal to Moi, and politically lethal. While the
Judy's got a monitor that's on a Walmart, a moving wall mount. So that means that when she's, I guess you could see it from the tub too. But I imagine her like working on this like it's a tablet when she's taking a massive dooder. Wait, do you take shits in here while you watch TV, Judy?
economy buckled under corruption and inflation, Ruto's profile rose quickly. He was appointed assistant minister in Moi's government. To some, he was just another loyalist. but to others, he was becoming something more dangerous. A man who would say anything, do anything, and align with anyone if it meant more power. By the time Moi's era ended in 2002, Ruto had become part of Kanu's inner circle, backing Uhuru Kenyatta in a losing battle against Mwai Kibaki. But Ruto didn't go down with this ship. He reinvented himself again, this time as a reformist. You see, in 2005, sensing the public's appetite for change, Ruto broke ranks with the Moi establishment. He aligned with Raila Odinga during the constitutional referendum. The same Raila he once opposed, the same Raila he would later betray. Each move was calculated, opportunistic, and strategic. Every betrayal earned him a bigger seat at the table. Every scandal somehow made him stronger. But that strength would soon be tested in the most violent chapter of Kenya's history, the 2007 election. And Ruto would find himself not just in the middle of it, but accused of helping light the march. Kenya, December 2007. The country is holding its breath. The general elections have just wrapped up. Raila Odinga, Ruto's new political ally, claims victory, but in a late-night announcement, the Electoral Commission declares Mwai Kibaki as the winner. Within hours, chaos erupts. Fires burn in Nairobi. Ethnic militias emerge in the Rift Valley. Neighbors turn on neighbors. Kenya is engulfed in a nightmare. Over 1,100 people are killed. More than 600,000 are displaced. The state is on the verge of collapse. And at the heart of it all is William Ruto. As a top Pentagon member of Raila's ODM, Ruto had become the party's key mobilizer in the Rift Valley. But after this violence, testimonies and reports begin to pour in. Human Rights Watch, international observers, and local NGOs all point to something chilling. Allegations that the violence in parts of the Rift Valley wasn't spontaneous, it was organized. Witnesses claim meetings had been held, plans drawn, machetes distributed, and Ruto was accused of being a key architect. In 2010, the International Criminal Court in The Hague lists its first suspects. Among them is William Ruto. He's charged with crimes against humanity, murder, persecution, and the forced displacement of people. The very court he once supported now wants him tried as a war criminal. But this is where things get complicated and dark. Staying on top of the fast-moving political landscape while delivering insightful, accurate commentary can feel like a monumental task. Geopolitics can change overnight. One decision, one conflict, one shift in using just test prompts. It will look like you wanted. It removes all the friction and puts you in the director's seat, letting users focus entirely on their vision and their idea, while in-video AI does all the heavy lifting. So, what are you waiting for? Go to the link in my description box below, check out in-video AI today, and create your own free avatar. Thank you in-video for sponsoring this video. Now, let's head back into our story.
But I want to stand here this morning to tell all and sundry we are innocent.
You see, Ruto
doesn't
my
vehicle finally came.
He flips the script. He paints himself as a victim of political persecution, and in Kenya, that narrative sticks.
Like, does it normally take like 20 hours for your car to be repaired in this, or is it like mission based? You know?
What's new?
Hey, baby girl.
Nothing special, same old story. I'd rather hear about you.
Illegal protest resisting arrest. Based.
What's new at the mocks?
Susie isn't giving me the time of day, as usual.
How'd you hook up with the mocks in the first place?
I thought Susie and the gang could really change something in this city. I believed in them.
Winded up business as usual?
I mean, I wouldn't go that far. Few Joy Toys' lives really change for the better thanks to them.
Couldn't you replace Susie and lead the mobs?
No way in hell. I'll stick with tuning virtues, thank you very much. If you haven't noticed, I'm not much of a people person.
I don't know exactly what tuning virtues is, but they say it a lot.
Got another question on my mind.
Shoot.
That's a great name. Divide by 0.
How's virtue tuning going? Scroll anything pre? Hey,
Depends
I don't
what
think
you
I
call
know you.
cream. Does
I'm
smut
Claire.
count?
Might not remember me. Bartender at the Afterlife?
Uh-oh. Forgot to close my tab.
Or has a buzz about you lately. As the merc who's reliable, gets things done. And since I need help,
Okay.
need a driver for street races. Drop by my auto shop, I'll tell you more.
You know, I think I'll pass.
Shame that. Well, if you change your mind, swing by my garage on Valley. See ya.
Bro.
How'd you get into virtues anyway?
I always had a techie streak, ever since I was a little kid. When I felt my first virtue, I was like, hey, I can make this way better. So I tried, and I did. And then it just snowballed from there.
Yep. I mean, I figured it's something to do with brain dances, but is that like... Do you have a fire truck on your chest? Is that a fire truck? Oh, I get it. She's into squirting.
Guess I kind of have to be into a little bit of everything. When it comes to virtues, I'm mostly in it for the intel.
You mean seeing who killed who using what?
Yeah, something like that, but you see it differently. For you, it's art.
Dolphin.
Always wondered, why the smut industry?
Isn't it obvious? 2 minutes of real feels a week's pay.
Sure, but I thought someone like you wouldn't be into the whole objectification thing.
Objectification, not in my virtues. My actors love what they do, and that's why everyone wants to feel them.
Okay, so virtues are porn?
Old school emotions.
Something else I wanted to talk about?
Got all the time in the world.
Oh, well.
The Bushido collection in BD format.
Wow.
Those 3 are collector's items nowadays.
I won't be bullied by your accusations. Yes, taxes are when corporations prosper, so does the community.
Did that TV just say tattoos are wrong?
Someone likes getting their feet wet.
Don't need to be an expert to tell the Gear's pro.
Who would have thought?
Perilous future. Electropunk? I'd rather puke out my ears.
Didn't ask Johnny. Okay, I think that's all the little doodad.
Suddenly, he's not just a suspect. He's a hero to his ethnic base, a martyr. The ICC becomes the enemy. International justice becomes a foreign plot. In 2013, in his stunning political twist, Ruto teams up with none other than Uhuru Kenyatta, who is also facing ICC charges. Together, they formed the Jubilee Alliance, bridging ethnic lines between Kikuyu and Kalenji communities. Their pitch was simple: national unity and resistance against foreign interference. The same unity
Balcony.
that had shattered Kenya just 5 years before. Well, they win the people's vote. Ruto becomes deputy president. Meanwhile, the ICC trial grinds on, but witnesses begin dropping out. One by one, some recant, some disappear. Others are found dead. A pattern emerges. The ICC itself acknowledges a systematic campaign of witness tampering, intimidation, and bribery. In 2016, the case collapses. Not because Ruto is cleared, but because it can't proceed. Officially, it's a mistrial, but on the ground, Ruto claims victory. He walks away without conviction and with even more political power. But the ghosts of 2007 never leave. They linger in displaced camps, in families still searching for justice, in the uneasy silence that now surrounds every election season in Kenya. William Ruto had survived the biggest test of his political life, but instead of reckoning, he emerged emboldened, untouchable. And from this moment on, a dangerous lesson is reinforced. In Kenya, power doesn't just protect you from justice, it erases it completely. By 2013, William Ruto had ascended to the second most powerful office in the country, Deputy President of Kenya. But while the title carried prestige, what he did with it told a different story. He had styled himself as the hustler-in-chief, the ordinary man in high office, and to many poor Kenyans, he still represented the dream, a man who had risen from selling chickens on the roadside to the very top of government. But behind that humble image, Ruto was building something else entirely, a political empire.
Fine. Keep an eye out.
For unknown reasons, the coordinates came through corrupted, so I'm unable to determine the precise location.
A business empire, and a trail of controversy that grew longer by the year. One of the earliest scandals came just months into office, the Hustler Jet affair. Ruto chartered a luxurious private jet for a diplomatic tour across West Africa, racking up a taxpayer-funded bill of over 21 million Kenyan shillings. The trip was framed as diplomatic outreach, but beneath that fancy name was vanity, a symbol of how quickly the hustler had become part of the elite. Then came the land scandals. In 2014, a court ordered Ruto to return a 100-acre farm to Adrian Muteshi, a man displaced during the 2007 post-election violence. The court found that Ruto had illegally taken the land. It was a damning ruling. Not only had Ruto allegedly profited from a national tragedy, he had stolen land from a man who was forced to flee for his life. Last same year, his name surfaced yet again, this time over the Western Hotel, a gleaming property in Nairobi built on land allegedly grabbed from the Kenya Civil Aviation Authority. Ruto denied wrongdoing, but the allegations wouldn't go away, and in 2015, things got even darker. Developers linked to Ruto tried to annex the playground of Langata Road Primary School, a public school, in order to expand Western Hotel's parking lot. When school children protested, the police responded with tear gas on children. Images of gasping students clutching their eyes flooded the news. It was a national outrage. Even Ruto's staunchest defenders struggled to explain away the images of 10-year-olds choking on state violence. The government backed off, but the damage was already done. Behind the scandals, a deeper pattern emerged: impunity. No matter how serious the allegation, Ruto walked away untouched. Investigations stalled, witnesses vanished, cases quietly collapsed. Amidst all this, Ruto came out with a new nickname, Arap Mashamba, meaning son of farms. You see, as deputy president, Ruto also expanded his business interests. Reports linked him to large farms, high-end real estate, luxury hotels, and insurance firms. But his official salary remained modest. And here's where the math didn't add up. The source of his growing wealth became the subject of whispers, then headlines, then parliamentary inquiries. But nothing stuck. Nothing ever did. Still, behind the scenes, a new friction was building. And this time, it wasn't with the opposition party. It was with his own boss, President Uhuru Kenyatta. And the moment that would blow their relationship wide open was already taken like a bomb.
President Uhuru Kenyatta took a swipe at his deputy over his economic policies and initiatives in the escalating field.
March 2018. Something happened that shocked.
Let's see what's good.
Take your pick.
I mean, how much RAM does that even save, though? Or... Cyberpoint. Why Cyberpoint?
Of the nation. President Uhuru Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga were seen together. They shake hands, smile, cameras flash. Kenya stares in disbelief. Just months earlier, Odinga had declared himself the people's president after a disputed election. There had been protests, deaths, and bitter political standoffs. And now, this, a handshake. To most Kenyans, it looked like peace. But to William Ruto, this was more than a betrayal. The thought of being driven out of the party left Ruto restless. This alliance meant only one thing: no seat at the table. Suddenly, Ruto was no longer the heir apparent. He was the odd man out. The handshake birthed something bigger, the Building Bridges Initiative, or BBI for short. Framed as a national healing project, BBI proposed constitutional reforms, new political positions, restructuring power dynamics. But Ruto wasn't buying it. He saw it for what it really was, an elite pact to block his 2022 presidential bid. And so, he came out swinging, publicly and boldly too. He painted BBI as a con job, dynasties trying to protect themselves from the hustler nation. It was the start of a new war, and this time, the battlefield was within his own government. Ruto's allies were purged from key positions. Governors, MPs, cabinet secretaries close to him faced arrest, tax investigations, media blackouts. Meanwhile, President Kenyatta's circle accused Ruto of undermining the government from within, using public resources to build his campaign machine.
She did say she wants him alive, huh?
By 2020, Jubilee, the party they had built together, was
I supposed to be taking them
Ruto
alive
launched
this whole
a new
time?
political identity, UDA, the United Democratic Alliance. Its mantra was bottom-up economics. He targeted Kenyan hustlers, the poor, the jobless youth. He turned his political exile into a populist brand. He wasn't just running for president anymore. This was a class war, and it worked. Crowds swelled at his rallies. The message resonated. For millions of struggling Kenyans, Ruto's story felt familiar. He promised a government for the people, not the elites, and every time the state tried to silence him or jail his allies, it only added to his mystique. The underdog fighting the system. But there was just this one problem. The system still had power, and the closer the 2022 elections came, the dirtier the fight became. The question was no longer if Ruto would run. It was how far the establishment would go to stop him and what he would be willing to do to win.
My competitors must wake up to the reality that I am their competitor. Uhuru Kenyatta is not their competitor.
August 2022, Kenya braces for yet another election. The tension is electric. The streets are uneasy. And once again, the country is on the brink. But this time, the race feels different. William Ruto isn't just a candidate anymore. He's the underdog turned front runner. His main rival, Raila Odinga, is backed by President Uhuru Kenyatta himself. And the paradox wasn't lost on anyone. The deputy president is running against the very government he serves. He's defying his boss, the state machinery, and the political elite. And somehow, he's winning hearts. Ruto's campaign leans hard on class. Its hustlers versus dynasties narrative sticks. He promises to turn Kenya into a nation of opportunity for the poor. He pledges to slash debt, create jobs, and restore dignity to the struggling majority. When the results come in, it's razor thin, 50.5%. The margin is just enough. The Supreme Court upholds the results. Raila Odinga challenges. Protests flare, but the court sides with Ruto. On September 13, 2022, William Samoei Ruto is sworn in as the 5th president of Kenya. He delivers a speech filled with hope and humility. He thanks God. He thanks the people. He promises a new dawn. But almost immediately, the mask slips. Soon enough, Ruto is out pledging support to climate change efforts aimed at reducing the use of fossil fuel. Within weeks, subsidies on fuel and maize flour are scrapped, sending the cost of living soaring. This is just another IMF recommendation, but the impact is brutal. Maize flour prices skyrocket. Fuel becomes unaffordable. The poor, the hustlers he claimed to fight for, feel the pain first. Then comes the 2023 finance bill. More taxes, higher VAT on fuel, a controversial housing levy. Kenyans are stunned. The same man who rallied against taxes while in opposition is now choking the very people who brought him to power. Protests break out. Raila Odinga's Azimio coalition calls for demonstrations. Youth pour into the streets. But the police respond with tear gas, rubber bullets, and sometimes live rounds. People die. The streets bleed. Still, Ruto stands firm. He blames the opposition for inciting unrest. He accuses them of sabotage. He refuses to compromise. But beneath the surface, something more dangerous is brewing. Public trust begins to erode, and fast. The economy teeters. Investors pull back, unemployment spikes, and a new generation, young, angry, and online, starts asking questions. Who is William Ruto really working for? Because for many Kenyans, it is starting to feel like the hustler they elected isn't one of them after all.
I don't know where he's shot, but he was shot. You could see blood.
3 bodies remain. 2 of them are wounded.
It begins with a hashtag, Reject Finance Bill 2024. Then a few TikTok videos, a thread on X. By the time the streets flood, it's already too late for the government to contain it. This isn't the opposition. This isn't Raila. This isn't Azimio. This is something the Kenyan political class had never seen before. It's leaderless, it's raw, it's angry, and it's Gen Z. In June 2024, President Ruto introduces a finance bill packed with new taxes. Fuel, bread, sanitary products, mobile money, everything gets touched. The government says it's about debt repayment and fiscal stability. But to ordinary Kenyans, it sounds like one thing: punishment. And the youth snap. They take to the streets peacefully with flags, placards, and art. Their signs are witty. Their chants are defiant. They call Ruto Zakayo, the biblical tax collector. They hold mock funerals for the cost of living. They live stream every moment. But the state doesn't respond with dialogue. It responds with force.
Why are you arresting me? Well, give me a reason. I protest because you're killing us.
Tear gas, water cannons, batons, bullets, and something else. Silence. A deafening silence from the leaders elected to protect them. On June 25, 2024, protesters marched toward Parliament, but they are met with sniper fire, real bullets, and real deaths occurred. Blood soaks Nairobi streets. 22 people are confirmed dead. Most of them are young, some shot in the back, others shot in the head. The nation is turned. But instead of quelling the protest, the violence does the opposite. It radicalizes them. Within days, demonstrations erupt in 43 out of Kenya's 47 counties. Urban slums, rural towns, college campuses, even diaspora communities. And the cry is no longer just about tax. It's about justice, dignity, accountability, the right to be heard. As the world watches, Ruto's government doubles down. Protesters are abducted in the night. Journalists are threatened. Social media slows. TV stations go dark. Bodies of missing activists are found in rivers and forests, tortured, broken, nameless even. Yet, the movement holds. Because it's not tied to a politician.
What an asshole.
It's tied to pain. The pain of Kenyans. The youth aren't asking for power. They are demanding a future. And in a country where every election cycle has felt like betrayal, Gen Z finally decides, enough is enough. The movement becomes a mirror, reflecting all the broken promises, the decades of corruption, the apathy of the elite. And at the center of it, standing alone and defiant, is William Ruto, the president losing control, a nation boiling over. Amid mounting pressure, President Ruto made a strategic retreat on the immediate trigger of the unrest. On June 26, 2024, Ruto announced he would withhold his signature from the Finance Bill 2024, effectively vetoing the tax hikes. The bill was subsequently scrapped on June 28, 2024, in what was a major concession to the protesters' primary demand. Ruto also tried to calm public anger by reshuffling his cabinet. In fact, he fired almost his entire cabinet in July 2024 in a dramatic gesture of reset. However, these moves did little to address deeper issues. Protests continued sporadically into July and August, evolving from tax-focused demonstrations into a broader indictment of Ruto's leadership.
What in the fuck?
Then, June 25, 2025. Exactly 1 year after the storming of Parliament, what began as a youth-led protest against a finance bill has evolved into something deeper, something angrier. People return to the streets, not to riot, not even to loot, but to remember. They carry flags wrapped in black ribbons. They wear shirts printed with the names of the dead. They bring flowers, candles, and photos of young lives cut short. For many, this is a funeral procession. The plan is simple: march peacefully, honor the fallen, and demand justice. But the state doesn't care for symbols.
Better look around.
Hey, look. Grimy.
Holy shit.
By midday, downtown Nairobi is sealed off. Roads blocked, parliament and state houses surrounded by razor wire and riot police. Armed officers in plainclothes mix into the crowd, and then the first shot rings out. Tear gas, rubber bullets, live rounds, and chaos. By evening, Nairobi is burning. Bonfires light up major highways. Protesters and police clash in pitched battles across the capital. In Mombasa, Kisumu, Nakuru, the story is the same. When the smoke clears, the toll is brutal. 16 dead, over 400 injured, dozens arrested, countless missing, and among the dead, a pregnant woman, a 17-year-old student, a man shot in the back while carrying a peace sign. The brutality feels intentional, as if to send a message. Don't come back. Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Makume calls it a failed coup. Ruto's allies say the protests were funded by foreign actors, another tired excuse. Online, Ruto supporters call the youth terrorists, but the images tell a whole different story. A mother crying outside a morgue, a blood-soaked flag, a police officer whipping a fallen protester as others run. Well, the world responds, but only just. The UN condemns the violence. Amnesty International demands an investigation. Western diplomats issue cautious statements, but no sanctions, no accountability, just statements. At home, the defiance continues. Protesters are now louder. Social media is blowing up with updates. The streets, once quiet, are now home to thousands. Something has changed. Even those who once defended Ruto are beginning to shift. Those who believed in him now whisper, this isn't what we voted for. Because when a president starts killing people for mourning the dead, what does that say about the soul of a nation? And where does Kenya go from here? Well, William Ruto is still in power, but the country around him is unraveling. His cabinet reshuffles haven't calmed the anger. His apologies feel hollow. And despite promising to listen, Ruto seems to hear only one voice, his own. The protests may have slowed, but the rage hasn't. He's gone inward, simmering and waiting. And now, even inside his own government, the cracks are beginning to show. It seems Ruto can no longer hide from the many corruption allegations and poor leadership. In fact, the Global Corruption Watchdog recently named Ruto as one of the world's most corrupt leaders of 2024, based on tens of thousands of public submissions. It's not just embarrassing, it's a damning report. The anger that once lived on the streets is now everywhere, on podcasts, around dinner tables. A quiet consensus is forming. This man must go. The people are tired and their anger can be seen on the streets. Now, Ruto must go. It's no longer just a chance, it's a diagnosis. The question now is, for when?
Gathering in Rio marks 16 years since the first Leaders Summit in 2009, a multilateral effort seen as an affirmation of an increasingly multipolar world, framed by geopolitical and trade tensions, debt concerns, and an increasingly perilous environment for the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. The bloc represents more than 40% of the global population and represents a sizable share of geopolitical and economic clout.
新兴市场国家和发展中国家
The BRICS cooperation mechanism is the most important platform for unity and cooperation among emerging markets and developing countries in today's world, and serves as a significant force in facilitating the realization of an equal and orderly multipolar world and an economic globalization that is inclusive and beneficial for all. This Leaders Summit is the first to be held after new member Indonesia and 10 partner countries joined the BRICS. A number of other emerging markets and developing countries, as well as international and regional organizations, have also been invited to participate in the meeting.
The group will focus on two priorities: global South cooperation and BRICS partnership for social, economic and environmental development, with 6 core areas: global health cooperation, trade, investment and finance, climate change, artificial intelligence governance, multilateral peace and security architecture, and institutional development. Areas that align with the principles of the recent Financing for Development conference held in Sevilla, Spain.
Resources flowing fast. Countries must lead by mobilizing domestic resources and investing in areas of greatest impact: schools, healthcare, social protection, decent work, and renewable energy. Unlocking these investments requires strengthening tax systems and tackling illicit financial flows and tax evasion, and helping developing countries dedicate a greater share of their tax revenue to the systems people need.
South Africa seeking to align its G20 leadership this year with both the G7 recently held in Canada and the BRICS in Brazil.
The global order is strained, resources are limited, but our resolve is not in the months ahead. We will continue to host the G20 summit in Johannesburg. We will deepen our partnership across the global south. Our foreign policy is not abstract, it is rooted in the lives of our people. And it is measured not in the speeches, but in schools built, jobs created, and peace sustained.
While the issue of peace and security from Ukraine to Sudan to Gaza will remain front and center.
What's happening in Gaza is not a war. What's happening in Gaza is a genocide conducted by a highly prepared army against women and children. That's what's happening. And this is what humanity should be outraged by. It's this that society should feel outraged about.
Notable absences this year will include China's President Xi Jinping, who will be represented by Chinese Premier Li Jiang, and Russian President Vladimir Putin, who will not travel due to an ICC warrant for his arrest. Framed as a forum of emerging economies who could provide a counterpoint to Western geopolitical dominance, the group has yet to fully exert its collective influence on the reforms so desperately needed in the international system. And as the group continues to expand, finding solutions through common ground becomes a more complicated undertaking. Sherwin Briceby's SABC News, New York.
Let me now touch upon Honorable Prime Minister's visit to Rio. The 17th BRICS Summit is taking place on 6th and 7th. Honorable Prime Minister will arrive on the 5th evening, but the main program is on the 6th. As you know, the format is very clear. There are full members, which are 10. There are about 12 partner countries. There are 8 invitee countries at the head of state, head of government level, and there are 7 heads of regional and multilateral bodies. The theme of the Rio Summit is strengthening global South cooperation for inclusive and sustainable governance. The program on the 6th includes the first agenda item, the reform of the global governance, where only the full members will participate. And thereafter, there is the second item on the agenda, the peace and security, which is in the working lunch format, where the leaders will discuss the agenda item, and all of this will be captured in the leaders' statements, which will be will be seen as deliverables. Post lunch, the third item on the agenda is strengthening multilateralism, economic financial affairs, and artificial intelligence. Later that evening will be an official reception. All the leaders will be participating. The next day, which is on the 7th July, the fourth item of the agenda is environment, COP30, and global health. As you are aware that Brazil will also be hosting COP30 later in the year, in November, which is why climate change and COP issues become very important. As you know, the Brics process is led by the chair, and they set the agenda, but the decisions are on a consensus-based format. We are hopeful that there will be 4 deliverables, although discussions are continuing still at the Sherpa and the Sous-Sherpa level. The leaders' declaration, the leaders' statement on global governance and artificial intelligence, the leaders' framework declaration on climate finance, and Brics partnership for elimination of socially determined diseases. There will also be, in addition, 4 reports that will be submitted to the leaders. One, the deliberations happened during the National Security Advisors level, the Business Council meetings that would have happened before that, the Women's Business Alliance report, and the Civil Council report. As you know, that all these discussions in the last few months across various platforms and working groups will find convergence in the declaration of the leaders, which will be endorsed by the leaders during that time. Both at the Sherpa and the Sous-Sherpa level, there have been intense discussions that have taken place. What we also notice that the Brazil's agenda more or less is encapsulating the ideas of the global South. And these are more or less in alignment with India's positions. And lastly, India will be holding the chair of the Brics next year, and which is why, in this context, Honorable Prime Minister's visit is even more important.
Secretary Yar just mentioned about the Brics portion of the visit to Brazil. I will try and add on to that by talking about the bilateral segment of the visit, which will be on... I'll start with Brazil, which will be on...
Now vehicles don't summon at all.
6th and 7th will be the Rio segment for the Brics Summit. As you know, Prime Minister has earlier visited Brazil on 3 occasions. The first in July 2014, followed by another visit in 2019 to attend the Brics Summit, and in November last year to attend the G20 Summit in Rio de Janeiro. During the state visit to Brasilia, Prime Minister is scheduled to hold bilateral talks with President Lula. The program basically includes a ceremonial welcome on arrival, followed by a restricted meeting and a delegation level format talks, culminating with a lunch hosted by President Lula for Prime Minister Modi. The state visit will provide an opportunity to review the entire gamut of our partnership, including trade and investments, oil and gas, renewable energy, mining and critical minerals, defense and security, agriculture and livestock, healthcare and traditional medicine, tourism, space, science and technology, DPI, and also sports and people-to-people relations in general. Both leaders will also be discussing during their talks global issues of mutual interest. The visit will be a significant milestone in the India-Brazil strategic partnership and is envisaged to add renewed momentum to the strategic partnership which we agreed to in 2006. On the trade front, India's trade with Brazil is the largest compared to any other country in Latin America. It had reached 16.6 billion in 2022-23, and following the drop in oil and gas prices, it is now around 12.2 billion, with India enjoying a trade surplus as we export goods worth $6.7 billion to Brazil and import goods worth $5.4 billion. Both leaders have set a bilateral trade target of 20 billion during their last meeting in November 2024. During their forthcoming meeting in Brasilia, the two leaders are expected to discuss ways to strengthen and diversify bilateral trade, including through expansion of the India-Mercosur PTA, as Brazil will be holding the chairship of Mercosur from 1st July 2025. India and Brazil are strong proponents of Global South cooperation. We also collaborate closely across all global platforms, of which we both are members, including Brics, G20, IBSA, and of course the United Nations. We also collaborate closely as members of G4, seeking comprehensive reform of the UN Security Council. We are looking at a few important bilateral MOUs and agreements, especially in renewable energy, agricultural research, and security cooperation. We'll give you more details during the course of the visit.
Now, the problem with Brics, of course, is that while it behaves like an organization of concepts, it has major contradictions within it.
Bro, why did
Brics
that
does
dude
not
just
have a
decide to
binding
spawn
treaty.
when I
The
was
Brics
fucking
does
around
not
and
have
blowing
a
up
fixed budget.
barrels?
The Brics does not have a permanent secretariat.
That wasn't
An
cool.
organization of that kind, you can't even actually call it an organization because it doesn't have a permanent secretariat. So an entity of that kind, for a better word, is in simply no position to create a alternative to dollar. There may be a lot of trade happening between India and China, but that trade is under a lot of scanner simply because if India does not carefully choose what it trades with China, it can become a national security challenge. There has always been a sentiment to create those forums which will air the concerns and demands of many of the developing countries, developing economies.
Hello, I'm Aisha Varma, and you're watching Hindustan Times. All eyes are on the Brics Summit, which is set to kick off in Rio de Janeiro on July 6th. To discuss what to expect from the summit and several other issues which are linked to the mega meet, we have with us Dr. Happymon Jacob, the founder and director of Council for Strategic and Defense Research, and an author as well. So thank you so much for taking the time to discuss this very important summit with us.
Thank you, Aisha. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, coming amid the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war, the recent Israel-Iran war, and other conflicts that could flare up into full-blown conflicts at any time, what sort of reforms could we see Brics advocate for when it comes to global peace and security architecture as well?
You know, Brics is an interesting, let's say, institution in some ways. It is not fully a fully formed geopolitical entity. It is not a fully formed geo-economic entity. It, in some ways, is an organization of the future. It exists because there are problems in the contemporary international system. It advocates for multipolarity in the international system, reforms in the international system. It wants a global order which accommodates the desires and demands of much of the humanity, which is the global south in many ways. And because the developed north and the west in some ways haven't really given much consideration and focus to the concerns of the global south, you have a bunch of countries that are coming together, apart from the global south, for instance, the G77, etc. We have now Brics. Now, the problem with Brics, of course, is that while it behaves like an organization of consequence. It has major contradictions within it. There aren't too many countries that agree with each other on a variety of issues. India and China, for example, forget about agreeing on many things. They are, in some ways, competitors in several fields and
this is
have
a good
an
time for you
ongoing
then?
rivalry between the two of them.
Hola.
India and
Been
Russia
thinking
are
about a new
friends, but
jacket.
we also have our
What do you
problems.
recommend?
Iran
Doesn't
and
matter.
India,
Just pick something.
or India's
Wow,
friends
great
and
sales.
Iran. So I think you're talking about an entity which is interesting on the one hand. On the other hand, it will also find it difficult to advance many of its objectives and demands on the global stage, not because of the opposition from the other side, global
Finally,
north,
some
the west,
shorts.
or the developed countries, but because of the weight
Good
of the
job.
internal contradictions themselves within BRICS. So I can see the desire for reform, but I'm not very hopeful that they will be able to push through many of these reforms with global consequences in that sense.
That's interesting. Speaking of China, the Chinese premier is attending the BRICS summit in the place of the Chinese President Xi Jinping. Why do you think Jinping decided not to attend the summit? Are cracks already beginning to appear in BRICS unity?
Well, he also did not attend the G20 meeting in Delhi, if you recall. So I don't sort of look at the attendance part per se as an indication of the Chinese lack of desire in or interest in BRICS. In any case, China is one of the champions of alternative forums internationally in order to push back the US-led world order. So I don't think the lack of participation from Xi Jinping himself is an indication of the lack of interest in the Chinese scheme of things towards BRICS. So having said that, I think if there are two countries that are really at the top of the BRICS advocating for global change and a new global order, etc., and that is China and Russia. Russia, of course, has its reasons because it is really out of the cold in some ways. It is because of, as you mentioned earlier, because of the Ukraine-Russia war. Russia has been finding itself out in the cold in the European sort of security architecture, the European balance of power in some ways, and therefore it needs alternative mechanisms. And China is now, of course, a great friend of Russia, and there aren't too many other forums that Russia is a part of, right? It's not part of G7 anymore, and its attendance at G20 is a problematic issue because Putin doesn't really travel to attend those. So one of those forums where Russia finds it possible to push through its global agenda, geopolitical agenda, is BRICS. So I don't really read much into the sort of absence of Xi Jinping in Brazil for this particular conference. I think it could be because of an entirely different set of reasons.
Absolutely. Reports say that BRICS members account for nearly 40% of global GDP by purchasing power, compared to just 30% for the G7 nations. Do you think that BRICS has the potential to become a direct counter to the West-led G7?
I don't think so. I don't think so because you have a number of countries in BRICS which have interests on both sides of the aisle. Take the Indian case, for instance. India is a $4 trillion economy, $4.2 trillion economy. China is a $20 trillion economy. China's view of the world is somewhat different from India's view of the world. China wants a alternative to the US-led world order with itself as the leader of that world order. Right? India does not look at the world order that way. India has problems with the contemporary world order, which is US dominated, which is Western centric in many ways, but it does not want a China centric world order either. Would India want an alternative payment mechanism that is dominated by Chinese yuan? I don't think so. So while you are right that much of the humanity lives in the BRICS countries, or in the global south in general, their ability to protect a cohesive, functioning, working alternative to the US world order is suspect at best, is impossible at worst. The reason is, as I said earlier, the internal contradictions. Countries like India have multiple sort of, it believes in multi-alignment, it has different agendas, different sort of permutations and combinations of these groupings. Russia, if the war ends and if there's a grand bargain between the United States and Russia tomorrow, and if there is a certain grand bargain between Russian Federation and countries in Europe for that matter, Russia will see itself as a part of the European global order, Europe-led global order, or will have a bargain with the Americans and Europeans. Their interest in global South will reduce. In any case, Russia has never been a member of the global South. So I think it is useful to talk about. Now, from an Indian point of view, from my own point of view, it is good to have various forums and mechanisms where we can talk about alternatives. But I think we must be very careful about what we wish for. If there is an end to the American-led world order, and it appears that America is its own worst revisionist enemy today because of what Donald Trump is doing to the global order, which was set up by the United States in 1995, right? So if that ends, who is going to be the next category? It is not going to be European Union, it's not going to be Germany, it's not going to be India, it's going to be China. Do we want to be part of that world order? I'm not so sure.
There has been a lot of chatter around BRICS leading the battle for de-dollarization. The United States President, Donald Trump, has even gone on to the extent of threatening BRICS nations with 100% tariff if they make a move towards de-dollarization. He even added that BRICS is dead, since we mentioned it. But how do you see BRICS' future vis-a-vis the United States, especially under Trump?
I think a lot of what Donald Trump, the President of the United States, says is in hyperboles, including his argument about de-dollarization, and the BRICS is pursuing a common currency, common payment mechanisms. A lot of that is in the realm of chatter. A lot of that is in the realm of speculation. Let's sort of, for a minute, analyze what, institutionally speaking, what has the BRICS done. The BRICS, of course, has the new development bank, which we call the BRICS bank in some ways. It is headquartered in Shanghai. It does not have a alternative payment mechanism. What exists is what is called the cross-border interbank payment system, or CIPS, led by China. India is not part of that. I think some countries, the Brazilian bank perhaps is now part of that. It hasn't really picked up in a big way. The BRICS does not have a founding treaty. The BRICS does not have a fixed budget. The BRICS does not have a permanent secretariat. An organization of that kind, you can't even actually call it an organization because it doesn't have a permanent secretariat. So an entity of that kind, for a better word, is in simply no position to create a alternative to dollar. That is Donald Trump speaking out. Donald Trump being Donald Trump, as it were. So all that happens in BRICS is that it provides a platform and a forum for a lot of countries. Now 11 countries and 30 or 20 or 30 countries have expressed their interest in either joining as observers or members, etc. And so therefore it provides a forum for articulating the views of a lot of countries in the world which are otherwise not heard at the United Nations, at the Security Council, or by the G20 or G7. That is what it basically provides. To confuse that for an entity that is viable as an institution with a treaty, with a secretariat, with budget, with payment mechanisms, with excellent agreement among them, is, I think, missing the point. There is no. In fact, I'm also concerned about the manner in which the BRICS is expanding. I personally believe expanding to irrelevance. The more you have, the more people you have in the room.
That would entitle it in being relevant now.
The less you will end up becoming a talking shop. Just take a look at the last years. The Kazan, with the last BRICS summit was in Kazan in Russia, and the last summit had a joint statement that had 32 pages, if I'm not mistaken. It talks about everything under the sun. It talks about everything that happens in the world. So what are you going to do with that kind of a document? not so sure. So I think it's becoming a talking shop. It is expanding to irrelevance. It doesn't have the necessary material wherewithal to stand up as a viable organization. Because I'm not dissing it. I'm saying there's a system that needs to be covered before you can be viable. It's a good platform for a certain political purposes, but not for material instrumental outcomes as well.
This leads me to my next question. Significant economic growth took place between BRICS economies, the original BRICS economies. I believe between the years of 1990 2015. Now, increasing economic cooperation is always a key item on the agenda, especially when we talk about countering the West. But with a group like this, with so much divergence, economically, socially, and politically, how do the priorities of the members differ and align?
It is very difficult to align their priorities. China is one of India's top trading partners, and at the same time, India realizes the need to move away from trading with China on sensitive items, be it, on sensitive technologies in particular, chips or telephonic equipment, because this could potentially be a national security challenge going forward. What about India and Russia? If you remove the oil trade, which only started in 2021, and if you remove the defense trade between India and Russia, there is no trade. There is no trade. There is no people-to-people cooperation. The relationship, in some ways, is an artificial one if you do not include the oil trade. The moment there is subsidy coming from another country, as far as India's oil purchases are concerned, India is going to move into that country, be it Iran, Iraq, Venezuela, whichever country that is. If the United States tells India tomorrow, I'm going to give you subsidies, India will move in that direction. So India has no ideological commitment to stick to any of the BRICS countries, because
what's going on over here?
BRICS countries, so there's no such commitment. It is about what is in it for me. So if there is something that benefits me in terms of energy trade or something else, then I'm going to stick to that. So I think the use of trade or development partnership or within BRICS, you can sort of improve trading relationship, and that will pose a challenge to the West or the G20 or the Americans or G7 for that matter, is, I think, daydreaming beyond that point. I can see very little political agreement among BRICS countries on a variety of issues, including recently, for example, you had the Israeli attack on Iran.
Yes.
Now, India looks at Iran on the one hand and Israel on the other hand and says, all right, when I'm in trouble tomorrow, who is going to stand by me? Do I expect the Iranians to support me if I have a standoff with Pakistan tomorrow? The Iranians will not. They'll probably be in the middle and say, this is not the era of war. That's what probably the Iranians will tell us. Whereas the Israelis will come and say, what do you want? We'll help you. So I think
Looking for some nice
there is
threads.
there is
Nothing
a
tacky.
prioritization of.
We'll find you
interest when it
something
comes to
dapper in no
countries.
time.
So solidarity or pushing back the American unipolarity or creating an alternative in the international order, they're all nice sounding, interesting arguments. But at the end of the day, what motivates a country, what is at the right on top of a country's agenda or priorities, is national security. Does India look at China as a national security friend or a challenge? It's a challenge. Sorry, I'm going on with this, but back to
No, please continue.
So my point simply is that there is there may be a lot of trade happening between India and China, but that trade is under a lot of scanner simply because if India does not carefully choose what it trades with China, it can become a national security challenge. Tomorrow, say for example, we are so dependent on critical minerals or on chips or electronic goods on China, and if there is a tension on the border, and the Chinese says, all right, the Chinese say that we are going to sort of put a stop to the trading in this particular commodity with India. That's going to be a problem for Indian industry. So India has no choice but to diversify. India has no choice but to look at countries who are more favorable towards India, be it Japan, be it South Korea, even if that's more expensive. That's a reality. So national security considerations are likely to overtake the considerations about trade, the considerations about the importance of having multipolarity, the importance of having alternative to US-led world order, etc. They're all nice. I'm not saying they're not important. They're important, but I think there is a ranking of priorities, and in that ranking of priorities, China is not really right on top, unfortunately.
You know, I want to bounce off of what you were just talking about a little while
Bounce
earlier.
pass.
When you were talking about the expansion of BRICS and how it's leading to its irrelevance in a way. Why do you see so many emerging economies lining up to join BRICS?
I can understand the sentiment behind many of the smaller countries, emerging countries, to be part of this grouping, because this is not something that is happening now, right? Look at, historically speaking, the non-alliance movement, which continues to exist today, but is under stress. It is not doing all that well. We have the G77, which is not doing all that well. We used to have many of these alternative forums in the global south, in the so-called third world of that vintage. Now, many of them are losing their significance. Many of them are losing their steam. But historically, there has always been a bunch of countries that banded together and said, we need to push our agenda. We need to push our demands and arguments on the global stage, because nobody at the United Nations would listen to many of these countries. For example, in the UNCTAD in the early 1970s, India and other countries pushed through what is called the new International Economic Order. That, of course, died as eventual death in sort of 1970s itself. So therefore, there has always been a sentiment to create those forums which will air the concerns and demands of many of the developing countries, developing economies, as you put it. So today, it appears that countries like China, countries like Brazil, South Africa, Russia, and India are at the forefront of a world order in which they think multipolarity is likely to be characteristic of the future world order. If that is the case, the other countries, smaller countries, think that we must also jump on this bandwagon. We must also become part of it, because we may be able to better articulate our demands, our views, and our feelings in forums such as this, if the other global south forums are not functioning. In any case, and I'll end with this, in any case, when a world order is crumbling, when there are challenges and problems in a world order, countries are looking around to see what's going to happen in the years to come, in the days to come, the decade from now. So they will try and latch on to, jump on the bandwagon of any of the forums which they think are friendly. And for many of the countries in the global south, in Africa or in Asia for that matter, BRICS looks like a forum which is friendly, which is accommodating, which is willing to accommodate many countries and partners. Unlike, say, the G7 for that matter, it's still G7 plus observers like India and invitees like India, or G20 for that matter. So the possibility, the ability of many of these countries to become part of the global something is more likely here than anywhere else. They're more likely to be heard here than anywhere. That explains, in my mind, why many countries want to sort of join.
It does.
BRICS, yeah.
You know, staying on the topic of BRICS expansion, Saudi Arabia has accepted the membership, but has not formally joined yet. They're saying that the matter is under consideration. Do you think the United States is behind the pressure on Riyadh to not formally join the bloc?
Riyadh is in many ways caught in many different directions, right? I mean, you have an ongoing war in the Middle East, several ongoing wars in the Middle East, but you have the Israeli, the Gaza-Israel-Palestine war that is happening. The UAE is not really, Saudi Arabia is not a country that is very keen on either continuing with that war one way or the other. They want an end to this and move on, right? I mean, they also look at Iran, which is a member of BRICS, and says, do we want a nuclear Iran in the Middle East? They look at that. No, we don't want a nuclear Iran in the Middle East. They look at the United States of America and ask themselves, what is the United States of America for us? United States of America is a major defense partner, trading partner for many of the countries in the Middle East, including for Saudi Arabia and UAE. So, there are competing pulls, pressures, and aspirations that many of these countries have. Some of them are willing to join several camps. Some of them are very suspicious of joining several camps. Some of them want to put all their eggs in one basket. Say for example, Saudi Arabia may not want to make that decision. It is circus mechanism. But I don't think it is going to be easy for the United States. But I think it may have its own calculations.
Okay. So coming to India now, the Prime Minister is going to be attending the summit in Rio de Janeiro. What do you think the Prime Minister's priorities will be in the summit?
I think the Indian side will go with some of the priorities as articulated by the Brazilian side. I mean, the Brazil, for example, has several goals as far as its presidency. It's interesting that Brazil was the G20 president in 2024 last year. It chairs the Brics summit now in July this year, and it's also going to be leading the COP, the climate summit, COP 30. Later this year. So the three major international summits of great consequence, and Brazil is part of that. Now, India, of course, was the chair of the G20 before that. So I think India aligns with many of the priorities that Brazil has for not just the BRICS summit, but also G20 and for COP 30.
I need to lay down.